A little boy who had so much love for everyone and everything is now gone.
That the death of that baby was at your hands, your neglect, your failure to be an adult.
I am Jessica Tomashow, also known as Victim A. I was sexually assaulted by Larry Nassar when I was 9 and 12 years old.
20-year-old Jacqueline OrtizWhitaker was found guilty by a judge of felony assault on an officer and possession of a stolen car. She was also convicted of misdemeanors, including resisting arrest and wielding a weapon. In court, OrtizWhitaker was visibly shaken, crying as the judge reviewed body camera footage, dashcam footage, and store video from the incident. A Virginia Beach police officer testified that a plate reader identified a stolen vehicle in the Baker Crossing shopping center on Newtown Road. The car's owner, a Top Guard security officer, explained he had left the keys in the car before his night shift at Military Circle Mall. However, the defense attorney raised questions about the officer when the vehicle was stolen. The events escalated on December 1st when the officer approached the stolen car. Dylann Whitaker, the driver, exited the vehicle and fled. The officer grabbed OrtizWhitaker and a struggle ensued over a gun she had in her waistband. The officer's body camera captured her yelling, "Babe, help me," as her husband returned to the car and pointed a gun at the officer. The officer fired several shots, fatally wounding Dylann Whitaker. The officer continued to try to arrest OrtizWhitaker. A Norfolk fire paramedic testified that she assisted in restraining OrtizWhitaker, while a bystander, initially concerned about the officer's actions, ran away when he saw the gun. The judge also reviewed an interview with detectives where OrtizWhitaker stated she never intended to shoot the officer. She only wanted to move the gun since it had a bullet chambered. Her defense attorney argued that OrtizWhitaker had the opportunity to shoot the officer after her husband was on the ground, but chose not to.
I didn't react, or my husband didn't react. My baby still would be here right now.
Despite the dismissal of the charge related to waving a gun at a bystander, OrtizWhitaker was convicted on all other counts. At sentencing, OrtizWhitaker was given a 25-year prison term for her actions. In Newaygo County, a grandfather has learned his sentence for leaving a gun accessible, which was used in an accidental shooting that killed his grandson. The tragic incident took place in April, resulting in the death of Braxton Dykstra. This marks the first case in West Michigan where someone has been sentenced for a safe storage violation, and the courtroom was filled with emotion as the judge delivered the sentence. For Braxton's family, all that remains are memories. On April 1st, Braxton was shot by his cousin, who accidentally fired a 12-gauge shotgun.
A little boy who had so much love for everyone and everything is now gone.
The tragic incident occurred at the home of Dykstra's maternal grandparents, Carl and Teresa Robart, in Garfield Township. The boys were watching movies when the 12-gauge shotgun, which had been left unsecured behind a bedroom door, was accidentally discharged by Braxton's cousin. Carl Robart told police that he didn't realize the gun was loaded, and he had kept it in that spot for years. He also mentioned keeping all other firearms securely stored around the house.
The people we thought we could trust with their kids failed. I will never get to hug my son again. I'll never get to hear his precious voice or his silly laugh.
Carl Robart appeared in court after pleading no contest to violating Michigan's newly enacted safe storage law, which mandates that gun owners keep their firearms unloaded and stored in a locked container.
This tragedy was 100% avoidable. All you had to do was listen to the people in your life that were telling you to put these loaded guns away. And you didn't.
My daughter knows how much I love her and the babies. And if I survive this, I'm going to do everything I can in my life to continue to support her and her children.
That's all you trying to minimize or trying to get yourself out of this situation, or have you live with yourself? That gun was loaded and you knew it was.
During the hearing, Robart spoke briefly, claiming he was unaware the gun was loaded. However, the judge expressed skepticism about his claims, emphasizing that the tragic incident could have been entirely prevented if the firearm had been properly secured. Robart received a sentence of 38 months to 15 years in prison for violating Michigan's safe storage law. In 2009, Albuquerque Public Schools teacher Dylann Roof was tragically murdered and buried in the Jemez Mountains. After more than 4 years of legal proceedings, her daughter-in-law, Kathleen Roth, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Authorities revealed that Kathleen, along with accomplice James Johnson, ambushed Ellen at her home, strangled her, and disposed of her body in a shallow grave. Kathleen Roth is in court again.
Ms. Roth, how do you plead into second-degree murder of the lesser included offense of count 1, conspiracy to commit a felony, that being first-degree murder, and larceny is charged in count 18?
Guilty.
I'll accept the plea and find the defendant guilty.
Kathleen Roth has now been convicted of the murder of her mother-in-law, Dylann Roof. A desire for revenge drove the crime after Ellen reported Kathleen's son, Brian Roth, for stealing her debit card. Kathleen, along with 2 accomplices, carried out the crime, strangling Ellen in her own garage before burying her in the Jemez Mountains. Ellen was reported missing for several months before her remains were discovered.
Are you guys okay with this?
I think that getting an overall exposure to 37.5 years is a really long time. Ideally, I'd like her to get first-degree murder charges, but this is gonna work.
The victim's family expressed that a trial would have prolonged the case even further, and they were opposed to a previous plea deal that would have resulted in 28 years in prison. Kathleen Roth's co-conspirators, Christopher Donovan and James Johnson, have already been convicted for their roles in Ellen's murder. The family stated that although it has been a long and painful journey, they now have a sense of justice for Ellen.
We'll never be whole again. Every holiday my aunt's not there, and there's things that will always make me think of her, but at least the court battle will be over finally.
Kathleen Roth, who helped lead police to her mother-in-law's grave, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and other charges. She was sentenced to 37 years in prison. Christopher Donovan, 20, also pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 15 years, though he has since been released and is now on probation. James Johnson, 23, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and additional charges, receiving a sentence of 28 years in prison. Brian Roth, Ellen's son, was not charged in connection with the case, as he was in prison at the time of his mother's murder. In October 2022, Valentina Lenoir tragically died from an overdose in Akron, Ohio. Her mother, Shelley Lenoir, and grandfather, Timothy Lenoir, were charged in connection with her death.
I live with it every day. I'm like, there's nothing I can do to bring her back.
Shelley Lenoir recalled waking up on October 27, 2022, to find her daughter, Valentina, dead. She had spent the night drinking and left her daughter in the care of their grandfather. Officials later confirmed that Valentina's death was caused by drug poisoning.
There was trash, food, discarded food containers, dog feces, all over the home.
Tears in her eyes, Shelley spoke about the deep regret she felt for her decision to leave that night, fully aware of her father's struggles with drugs. She expressed the pain of knowing that her actions contributed to the tragic outcome.
She grieves for her child. She loved her child. She was a mother who had 0 resources, down on her luck.
Valentina can't defend herself. She's 2. She was 2. There was nothing she could do to protect herself. There was nothing she could do to reach out and ask for help.
Timothy Lenoir claimed he did not remember much of the night, but recalled leaving the girl with someone from the neighborhood. Timothy was handcuffed and escorted out of the courtroom as the proceedings continued. He repeatedly addressed the judge, insisting that he did not understand what had happened.
That the death of that baby was at your hands. Your neglect, your failure to be an adult.
Shelley pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment, while Timothy pleaded guilty to child endangerment. In October 2024, Shelley Lenoir and her father, Timothy Lenoir, were each sentenced to 30 months in prison. Megan Paris was convicted of second-degree murder in the death of her then-boyfriend's son, Ian Berger. Paris initially claimed that the death was an accident, stating that Ian slammed his head on the bathtub while she was changing his clothes. However, prosecutors argued that this was the third version of the events she had told people. Medical experts testified that Ian died from head trauma, with injuries so severe that they could not have been caused by a simple fall. During the trial, Ian's father and other family members gave emotional victim impact statements.
There are no more good mornings, good afternoons,
good days or good nights for me. There are only days and bad days.
Megan Paris had previously lied about the circumstances surrounding the death of Ian Berger, claiming that past trauma she had experienced influenced her actions. In the latest development, Paris was sentenced to 40 years in prison with 20 years suspended. The mother of Logan Klein, who was murdered before his body was hidden in an abandoned car in 2019, has chosen to forego a trial and plead guilty to murder. Stormy Johnson now follows her former boyfriend, Corey Trumbull, to prison for the killing of Logan. Logan's body was discovered near a Wichita Falls motel where the couple had been evicted. District Attorney John Gillespie shared that before the plea, he had extensive discussions with Logan's family, and it was decided that pleading guilty would spare them from another trial, particularly Logan's sister, Lexi, who was in her senior year of high school. Lexi had witnessed much of the abuse and neglect Logan suffered at the hands of Trumbull and Johnson and had testified during Trumbull's trial.
Lexi's very strong. She's a strong girl, and she was willing to testify against her mom, but she looked at me and the family agreed. They said, "We trust you with everything. You have more experience at this than we do. We trust you. If you think this is right, then you absolutely have our permission to do that."
Trumbull was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life without parole just 10 days ago. Johnson pleaded guilty to murder and tampering with evidence, specifically a corpse. She was sentenced to life in prison for murder and 20 years for tampering, with both sentences to be served concurrently. In the plea deal, Johnson agreed to prevent her from appealing either of the cases. She'll be eligible for parole in 30 years, but Gillespie says he'll file his opposition to parole. After many years, a murder case in Lowndes County has finally been resolved. Christina pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the killing of Manuel Vasquez. During the proceedings, victim impact statements were given virtually by Manuel Vasquez's family, who requested the maximum sentence for Martinez. Vasquez was shot and killed in his New Hope home in July 2015, and his remains were later found in the yard. Initially, Martinez claimed that her mother, Lydia Martinez, had pulled the trigger. In turn, Lydia Martinez asserted that Christina was the one who shot Vasquez.
I'm extremely relieved that the case has reached its conclusion. I mean, it took tons of work by the sheriff's office to get it to the point where we could prosecute it, and then it took years to get the prosecution at a point where we could get Lydia and Christina both punished.
It was a group effort for everybody to get to this day and to finally get both defendants sentenced, and hopefully the victim's family can move on and have some closure now.
Christina Martinez has been sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole during her sentence. Her mother, Lydia Martinez, was convicted of first-degree murder and received a life sentence in prison. In late 2013, 40-year-old Manny Vasquez, a San Antonio air conditioning business owner, relocated his family to Mississippi, but continued to visit San Antonio for work. His sister and mother last saw him in June 2014. In August 2014, investigators discovered remains in Mississippi, which they identified as Vasquez. Subsequently, his wife and mother-in-law were charged with his murder.
I want to know why. That's it, just why. I still can't believe it.
Vanessa Pena, Manny Vasquez's sister, expressed that nothing about her brother's death makes sense. Vasquez, a dedicated businessman, devoted husband, and father of 3, was tragically murdered, leaving his family and loved ones in shock and disbelief.
He was real genuine, real giving. He was a godly man.
Investigators have identified the perpetrators behind Manny Vasquez's murder. His wife, 37-year-old Christina Martinez Vasquez, who had been married to him for 20 years, along with her mother, Lydia Martinez, who lived with the couple, have been charged in connection with his death.
It's a numb feeling. She said he was going to be gone for 3 to 4 weeks, which was long. We found it kind of odd because he didn't let any of us know.
Vasquez was last seen on June 24th. His wife, Christina, told family members that he had gone on a retreat, though she couldn't say where. Christina's concerns seemed to diminish as time passed, raising suspicions among those close to Vasquez.
Have you heard from him? And it was always a no. All her answers were, I don't know. I don't know. When she knew everything about him. They were together 20 years and They wouldn't go anywhere without each other.
On July 13th, Manny's mother reported him missing in San Antonio. A week later, investigators searched his property in Mississippi. They discovered ashes, leading them to believe that Manny was killed inside his house.
His remains were spread around his property.
In 2019, Cristina Martinez pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the death of her husband, Manny Vasquez, and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Her mother, Lydia Martinez, was convicted of first-degree murder and received a life sentence. Trinity Noland, a woman with a lengthy criminal history and a conviction for manslaughter in Clay County, is back in the Wichita County Jail after failing to attend a scheduled court hearing. A new arrest warrant was issued for Noland on May 19th when she missed the hearing regarding charges of possession of a controlled substance and tampering with evidence, leading to her bond being forfeited. Her total bond amounts to over $200,000. The charges came from a September 2022 arrest following a traffic stop on Martin Luther King Boulevard. Just weeks after completing parole for a previous offense, Noland was arrested in August 2022 for an alleged forgery at a liquor store on Seymour Highway. Noland has a criminal history that includes time served for aggravated robbery and manslaughter, the latter charged initially as murder in connection with the 2016 death of Sean Simpson in Clay County. That same year, she was accused of committing several robberies in Wichita Falls with a male accomplice. In 2019, she pleaded guilty to 2 robbery charges and was sentenced to 7 years. After serving a brief time in prison, her sentence became probation. Crystal Ferris, a Juneau County woman convicted of killing the father of her daughter, is back in court after pleading no contest to the 2019 death of her boyfriend, Jason Daly. Ferris will serve 40 years in prison for the murder. Investigators revealed that Daly was killed inside his Nessetta home. Court records show that a deputy went to the home to check on Daly after he failed to show up for work. There, the deputy found Ferris unresponsive. Daly's body was discovered in the master bedroom, covered by a sheet. An autopsy confirmed that he had died a few days before being found. The question of why anyone would want to harm Jason Daly remains unanswered. While Ferris is believed to know the reason, she has not shared it. In an emotional plea to the judge, Daly's parents spoke about the impact of Ferris's actions on their family, especially their granddaughter, who now lives with them. Daly's mother expressed her sorrow, saying she knows her husband is in heaven, but struggles to understand where her daughter-in-law is. She also shared the painful burden of not knowing how to tell her granddaughter that her mother killed her father. Throughout the proceedings, both Daly's parents and prosecutors have questioned whether Ferris feels any remorse for her actions. Ferris was sentenced to 40 years in prison after pleading no contest.
I believe that Jason honestly loved her. He saw positive characteristics in Miss Ferris, and that he wanted to do the best to bring those out to her. He genuinely loved her. He gave her a home. He gave her support. And this is a situation where by her own violent, terrible acts, she's thrown all that away.
Ferris was originally charged with first-degree intentional homicide, along with several other felonies in Daly's death. Some of those were either modified or dismissed as part of a plea deal with prosecutors. Ferris was sentenced to 40 years in prison after pleading no contest. On May 29, 2021, 18-year-old Maria Elizabeth Pena Echeverria was arrested and charged with the murder of 69-year-old James Lacey Taylor in Raleigh, North Carolina.
All right, ma'am, is your name Maria Pena? All right, ma'am, you're charged with murder in the first degree. If convicted, you could get up to life without parole or the death penalty. Your court date's June 21st at 9 o'clock. Ms. Grimes, does she need the public defender?
She does, Your Honor. She would request that you appoint the public defender at this point.
All right, I will appoint the Capitol Defender's Office, and they'll assign a lawyer to help you in this, ma'am. Anything further for the state?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Grimes?
Not at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
June 21st at 9 o'clock.
Taylor was found seriously injured at Mount Olivet Cemetery and later died at a hospital. Witnesses reported seeing Pena Echeverria and 2 men leaving the scene in a pickup truck and an older model sedan. Pena Echeverria was held at the Wake County Detention Center without bond. Subsequent investigations led to additional arrests, including 19-year-old Jonathan Daniel Villanueva Galler, who was charged with murder in connection with Taylor's death. Patricia Bell made her first court appearance as the murder suspect in the death of Antwon Chisholm, with whom she lived. Meanwhile, his family is remembering him as a caring and generous person.
He was just an overall, just a kind-hearted guy. You know, loved his family, very dedicated to his family. Everything he did was in an attempt to give his family more. He was never worried about himself.
On May 8, 2023, 34-year-old Antwon Durrell Chisholm was shot in his Garner, North Carolina home. His fiancée, 27-year-old Patricia Bell, and 30-year-old Howard Lee Covington Jr. were arrested and charged with his murder.
Like any normal relationship, they had their issues, but I never thought that in a million years it would ever lead to something like this.
Chisholm's mother expressed her intense grief. During Bell's initial court appearance, she was assigned a capital defender and held without bond. Covington's first court appearance was scheduled for the following day. Chisholm's family emphasized that obtaining justice is their primary concern.
It is our number one priority. That's our number one priority right now.
Patricia Bell and Antwon Durrell Chisholm had recently engaged during a Puerto Rico trip. Tragically, Chisholm was killed on Monday and Bell was arrested the following morning. During the interim, Bell posted on social media expressing her heartbreak. Shelley Perry, a Hinesville woman charged in connection with the death of her daughter, Ania, is seeking a reduced bond as she prepares to ask a judge for relief. Perry faces multiple charges, including hiding a death, tampering with evidence, and making false statements after Ania was found unresponsive in their Saunders Drive home on May 1st. Brandon Robinson, Perry's boyfriend at the time, has also been charged in the case. Perry pleaded for understanding in a heartfelt letter to the Liberty County Superior Court, stating, "The felony jumpsuit doesn't define me. I'm a mother and a daughter." The letter describes her challenging experiences growing up and includes an apology to the court for the circumstances leading to her imprisonment. Perry expressed a desire to address her struggles, writing, "I want to go to mental rehab, drug rehab, and counseling. I want help." Perry had been granted bond, set at $25,000 cash for each of her 4 charges, but she argued that the jail environment does not provide the resources she needs to get better. In her letter, she requested a rehab bond or consideration for drug court, and if those options were not possible, she asked for a bond reduction. A judge has agreed to hear her request in court, with a hearing scheduled. Perry remains in the Liberty County Jail as she awaits this decision. Notably, neither Perry nor Robinson has been charged with murder in connection to Ania's death. In an emotional hearing, family members of Shanta Tre Grant addressed the judge about the intense impact his death has had on their lives. Grant, a 32-year-old community activist, was tragically gunned down on June 15, 2018. The primary defendant in the case, 24-year-old Lionel Tate Grant, who had coordinated the robbery that led to Shanta Tre Grant's murder, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Judge Michael Karp stated that while Nolante's actions set a tragedy into motion, the sentence still leaves room for the possibility of parole, though it may not happen for another 30 years or more. The second defendant, 25-year-old Osha Dunham, received a much harsher sentence. Dunham was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for Shanta Tre Grant's murder, as well as a second life sentence for the murder of Robart Lee Jr. In addition to these sentences, Dunham was handed 315 years for multiple other shootings involving 5 additional victims. Judge Karp expressed that it was nearly impossible to fully describe the heartbreak and terror Dunham had caused within the community. During the hearing, family members of Robart Lee Jr. also spoke, including the victim's father, Mr. Lee Sr., who looked directly at Dunham and said, "You took my son away from me." He stated that prison was too lenient a punishment for Dunham's actions. Dr. Christopher Duntesh, a former neurosurgeon, gained notoriety for the devastating impact of his surgeries on numerous patients. He was charged with intentional harm to his patients.
Does not keep you from prosecution if you maim and kill people.
This will not bring my mother back, but it is some sense of justice. For all of the families, for all of the victims.
Caitlin Len's mother, Kelly Martin, tragically lost her life during a back procedure performed by Dunch. Mary Effort shared how she was left paralyzed after a failed operation, vowing never to trust him again.
I said, he will never touch me again.
Witnesses and former patients testified that Dunchich often performed unnecessary surgeries, motivated by financial gain and a desire for a lavish lifestyle.
Because of greed.
because he owed people a lot of money. He wanted to live the high life.
She's a monster.
Psychopath.
Killer.
Jacqueline Troy described losing her ability to speak normally,
They didn't know if I would survive.
while Jeff Chaney explained how a surgery error left one side of his body paralyzed.
I was horrified. I was speechless.
Lee Passmore continues to experience debilitating nerve pain following a procedure.
It feels like somebody has an ice pick planted squarely in my back.
Paytons cried with tears of joy when they realized that no one else will go through what they did.
Confinement in the Institutional Division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for life.
After hearing these accounts, the court sentenced him to life in prison. He will spend his entire life in Texas Department of Criminal Justice, ensuring he would never practice medicine again. Larry Nassar, a former doctor for USA Gymnastics, betrayed the trust of countless young athletes. Survivors shared emotional stories of how he used his position to harm them under the guise of medical care. Kyle Stevens revealed that the betrayal began when she was a young, while others described feeling manipulated into trusting him.
I testified to let the world know that you are a repulsive liar. I am Jessica Tomashow, also known as Victim A. I was sexually assaulted by Larry Nassar when I was 9 and 12 years old. You broke and shattered a lot of girls. You manipulated us to trust you because you're a doctor, and doctors do no wrong, only heal. You are not a healer. He betrayed my trust, took advantage of my youth, and sexually abused me hundreds of times.
A mother of a victim testified who died.
In 2009, she took her own life because she couldn't deal with the pain anymore.
He even manipulated the families of the victims.
His conniving and calculating behavior not only tricked me, but he tricked my mom, who was present for all my appointments as a minor.
Families shared how this abuse caused long-term emotional pain, even affecting their relationships. One of the victims' father was friend of Nassar and trusted him.
You used my body for 6 years for your own gratification. That is unforgivable. You convinced my parents that I was a liar. My father and I did our best to patch up our tattered relationship before he committed suicide in 2016. Perhaps you have figured it out by now, but little girls don't stay little forever. They grow into strong women that return to destroy your world.
Nassar addressed the victims.
Your words these past several days, your words have had a significant emotional effect on myself and is shaking to my core.
The survivors stood up bravely and testified what they went through. They wanted justice for the years that they lost, but emotional pain that will remain with them forever.
I'm giving you 175 years.
After extensive testimonies, the court sentenced Nassar to 175 years in prison, ensuring he would never harm anyone again. Dr. Robert Haddon, a former gynecologist, used his position to take advantage of vulnerable patients, including expectant mothers. He was charged with abusing 4 women, with over 200 others accusing him of similar crimes. Survivors recounted their shock and betrayal upon learning the truth, with one explaining how the experience left her frozen in fear. Others shared how they trusted Haddon as a professional, never imagining he could act in such a way.
He assaulted me 2 days before my son was born. At that moment, I was frozen, and I'm not frozen anymore.
Haddon's wife sobbed after the verdict.
There's a bit of a relief, a smidge, and there's a lot of sorrow and sadness.
It's disheartening. I referred patients, I referred friends, and I think that's one of the guilt hasn't left me.
After hearing these accounts, the court sentenced him to 20 years in prison, bringing a measure of justice to those affected. The survivors were happy with the verdict and celebrated.
I got in the hot tub, and the very last thing I remember is just looking at the water and then just lights out.
She was in the shower, half clothed, and just making no sense.
You coming forward really started this process. You really made a difference here.
It was not easy. It was not an easy decision, and it was not an easy road. But I knew it was the right thing to do, and I stuck to my guns, and I did it.
It would be improper if you did not serve a sentence for each victim individually. The total number of years are 158 years in prison. This matter is concluded.
There is no amount of time that takes away what happened. It does mean he won't be able to do it to anybody else.
Dr. Jack Kevorkian, a Michigan pathologist, became known for his controversial advocacy for assisted suicide.
When a law is deemed immoral by you, you must disobey it.
He created methods that allowed terminally ill patients to end their lives, sparking heated debates about medical ethics and personal choice.
Well, the media's reaction and public's reaction seemed to be favorable to the procedure that he was performing. However, they started to state that it was the proper message, but the wrong messenger. My response to that, of course, eventually was to the effect, who else would be the right messenger? Nobody else who performed it would even admit to it or talk about it. And the only way he could get it out nationally, internationally, was to promote it in such a manner as he did.
While some praised him for his compassion, others criticized his methods as too provocative.
He was a showman. He was a provocateur. He was abrasive. He wasn't polite. No, he was intent on making a statement from his perspective. Highlighting the problem is a genuine social service. Now, on the other side, Jack Kevorkian did essentially nothing to offer society a solution to that problem. He was not politically adept in any way. He did not proceed with the kind of social change that would make a medical procedure available to people that they wouldn't have to travel, or changing the culture of medicine.
After years of operating in a legal gray area, Kevorkian was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison. He served 8 years before being released under the condition he no longer assist in such cases. Kevorkian passed away at 83, leaving behind a legacy of both advocacy and controversy. Fred Hopkins Jr., a Vietnam War veteran and former attorney, lived with his adopted son, Seth Hopkins, in Florence County, South Carolina. On October 3, 2010, sheriff's deputies arrived at the Hopkins residence to serve a search warrant. The warrant was part of an investigation into allegations against Seth Hopkins, who was accused of inappropriate conduct with a girl. When law enforcement approached the home, Fred Hopkins ambushed them using a rifle. The incident escalated into a standoff lasting several hours. During the assault, Florence Police Sergeant Terrence Caraway, a dedicated officer with 30 years of service, and Florence County Sheriff's investigator Farrah Turner were tragically killed. 5 additional officers sustained injuries. Hopkins surrendered after the prolonged confrontation.
October the 3rd, 2018 is a date that law enforcement in Florence County will never forget. It will be remembered forever. I know I won't ever forget it. We lost 2 heroes. 2 heroes.
The night before the shooting, Fred Hopkins had been playing trivia with friends David Salinger and Perry Martin. Witnesses described Hopkins as being in an agitated and distressed state. He reportedly shared his frustrations about his family, claiming it was falling apart, and expressed paranoia about law enforcement coming to his house. Both Salinger and Martin testified that Hopkins stated he would respond violently if officers arrived, with Salinger urging him to lock away his firearms to prevent any rash actions. Unfortunately, this advice was ignored.
You know, and also we have here today Mr. Salinger and Mr. Perry, who were with Mr. Hopkins the night before this shooting took place. They were here, they were playing trivia with him. If you feel necessary, I can put them up for a interview from the witness stand, cross-examination if need be. But to summarize what they would testify to, they testified that they knew Mr. Hopkins from playing trivia with him. They were part of a trivia team together. But that night, before the shooting, that Mr. Hopkins came in and highly agitated and said that his family is disintegrating. The police were going to come to his house. Further, he went on to say if the police came to his house, he was going to shoot them. And is what Mr. Salinger would say, and said that he had a great field of vision to view people coming to his house in order to be able to do that. The other gentleman, Your Honor, oh Lord, Perry, yes, Mr. Perry. Mr. Perry was going to testify that Mr. Hopkins said he was going to shoot them all if they came to his house. He would shoot them. And the reason we wanted to submit that, Your Honor, this time it refutes some of what Mr. Hopkins said. And In regards to the premeditation of this whole incident, he had it in his mind the night before. He discussed that with these people. They told him, Mr. Salinger told him to go lock all of his guns up so he couldn't get to them and hide the key till he got rid of his anger, but that didn't happen. But if you want to hear from them from the witness stand, Your Honor, they are here and available.
Officers who survived the ambush described the chaos of the scene. They recounted the terrifying moments of being under fire, the efforts to rescue their injured colleagues, and the bravery displayed by all involved. These accounts underscored the calculated nature of Hopkins' actions, revealing that the ambush was premeditated. Fred Hopkins and Seth Hopkins were both taken into custody following the incident. Seth Hopkins faced charges for second-degree criminal sexual conduct, and in December 2019, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 20 years in prison.
That Ferris work's done because she always did an outstanding job. So did Sarah, Ari, Chase, the other people that did forensics. They all worked together as a team, and they were prepared and were building a strong case, as it's shown. And it just gives a little closure that Ferris' last case resulted in a guilty plea.
The victims might get closure as their last case was given a guilty verdict.
Are you aware you must waive all those defenses and claims in order for me to accept this plea? And he, without hesitation, accepted to waive any of those claims and accept responsibility for what he did. I think your proffer is appropriate, but I don't think we need live testimony.
Fred Hopkins faced charges for 2 counts of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. After years of legal proceedings, Fred Hopkins pleaded guilty on October 19, 2020. During the sentencing hearing, he accepted full responsibility for his actions, acknowledging the harm he had caused.
Of this case, and the sentencing will bring closure to the families of the victims and the victims themselves, and to the Florence community as a whole, and the PD. It's a big family down here, and y'all deserve closure. Where I attend church, and you got to keep your faith, where I attend church, my pastor tells us every Sunday, God loves you, and so do I. And so y'all remember that. Each and every one of you. Mr. Young and Mr. Hopkins, I want to remind you all have a certain number of days in which to file a notice of intent to appeal, if that's so your intent regarding any procedures that took place, for the record. Indictment 2020 GS 21-909 has 7 counts. 2 counts murder, 5 counts attempted murder. The 2 murder sentences carry life sentences. The 5 attempted murder sentences each carry 30, and they're to be served consecutively. I hope that's a message to others. This type of behavior is not to be tolerated. That concludes the hearing.
The court sentenced him to 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders and 5 additional 30-year sentences for the attempted murders, totaling 150 years. This plea deal spared him the death penalty. In December 2023, the South Carolina Court of Appeals dismissed Fred Hopkins' appeal of his conviction and sentence, solidifying the court's original ruling. Hopkins is now serving his life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he will never harm anyone again. On July 19, 2018, a confrontation unfolded at a convenience store in Clearwater, Florida. Michael Draka, a 48-year-old armed with a concealed carry permit, confronted Brittany Jacobs, who was parked in a handicapped space without a permit. Marquise McLaughlin, Jacobs' boyfriend, came out of the store and saw the argument. He approached Draka and shoved him to the ground. Draka then pulled out a firearm and shot McLaughlin. He later died from the injury. The incident was captured on surveillance video, which became a critical piece of evidence. Draka remained at the scene and cooperated with law enforcement, claiming he acted in self-defense. Initially, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office declined to arrest Draka, citing Florida's Stand Your Ground law. This decision sparked widespread public outrage and protests, as many believed the shooting was unwarranted and racially motivated.
One more step towards me. I didn't say a word. The door's already out. Okay, what do? Fire me.
In August 2008, the state attorney's office filed a manslaughter charge against Draka. Prosecutors argued that McGlockton was retreating when Draka fired, making the use of deadly force unjustifiable. The defense maintained that Draka feared for his life and acted within his rights.
It was very clear and was very evident that this just was not another case. It was very clear and very evident that you fought to remember, to make the jury remember, to make the world remember that Marquise's life mattered. We're thankful that the jury got it right. We're thankful that the jury saw what we saw what everybody saw in that video, that a parking lot vigilante with an axe to grind murdered Marquise McGlockton in cold blood.
Once again, it's been well over a year since we've been dealing with this matter, and I can safely say my family can rest now. Now we can start putting the pieces back together and move on.
Draka's trial began in August 2019. Key evidence included the surveillance footage, which showed McGlockton stepping back as Draka fired. Prosecutors emphasized that McGlockton no longer posed a threat at the time of the shooting. Witnesses testified about Draka's history of confrontational behavior, including prior incidents where he allegedly argued with others over handicapped parking spaces.
State of Florida versus Michael Draka, case number 1809851CF, as to the charge of manslaughter. We, the jury, find as follows as to the defendant in this case. The defendant is guilty of manslaughter as charged.
After approximately 7 hours of deliberation, the jury found Michael Draka guilty of manslaughter on August 23, 2019. The jury concluded that Draka's use of force was not justifiable.
Accordingly, after that rather detailed legal and factual analysis, the sentence will be as follows. Mr. Draka, I'm going to find you guilty. I'm going to adjudicate you guilty. I'm going to sentence you to 20 years in the Department of Corrections with all credit for time served. And I believe he has in 91 days, is that it?
92. In October 2019, Draka was sentenced to 20 years in prison with credit for time served. The judge noted the severity of the crime and its impact on McGlockton's family, including his son. From a tragic playtime accident to a senseless act of violence, these stories reveal the heartbreaking consequences of choices and the pursuit of justice. Lionel Tate's case captured national attention in 2001 and remains one of the most debated juvenile cases in U.S. history. The tragic incident began on July 28, 1999, in Pembroke Park, Florida, when Lionel's mother, Kathleen Tate, looked after Tiffany Unick. Lionel, then 12, claimed they were play wrestling when Tiffany became unresponsive.
Lionel Tate beat her over the course of 5 minutes with fists and stomping and kicking and punching, where he admitted he punched her 35 to 40 times, while Kathleen Tate was allegedly upstairs with the door closed, sleeping.
He would have known at that time that this child was suffering.
However, investigators found evidence of severe injuries, including fractures and internal damage, that did not align with his explanation of an accident. Lionel was charged with first-degree murder, a charge that carried the potential for life imprisonment.
Broward County Grand Jury has met in the investigation of the death of Tiffany Unick and has voted to indict the defendant, Lionel Tate, for first-degree murder.
Despite being offered a plea deal involving 3 years in prison and probation, Lionel opted for a trial.
Decided to offer a plea bargain to have some resolution for Tiffany's mom, Deweese, have some justice for little Tiffany, but also have some type of punishment and some hope of rehabilitation for Lionel Tate.
In 2001, at age 14, Lionel became the youngest person in the U.S. to be sentenced to life in prison without parole. His conviction was overturned in 2004 after the court determined his mental competency had not been properly assessed during the trial. He was released under house arrest, but soon faced legal trouble again. In 2005, Lionel was arrested for armed robbery, leading to a 30-year sentence for violating probation. He is currently serving his sentence in Florida. On February 21, 2011, Officer David Crawford of the St. Petersburg Police Department responded to a call about a suspicious person near Tropicana Field. Upon arriving, he encountered 16-year-old Nicholas Lindsay, who had been reported acting suspiciously in the area. The situation escalated tragically, resulting in Officer Crawford's death.
His decision, not his parents', to reach into his pocket, waistband, or whatever, pull that out, point it, and 5 times into the body of David Crawford.
Following a community-wide manhunt, police arrested Nicholas Lindsay after receiving tips. Initially, he denied involvement, but later confessed with encouragement from his mother, Denise Lindsay. Nicholas was charged with first-degree murder and tried as an adult.
It is hard when you think about sending a 16-year-old to prison for the rest of his life. But this 16-year-old kid was a sophisticated criminal, and he didn't just shoot a person and commit a random act of violence. He killed a police officer, and he shot him not once but 5 times.
In 2012, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Changes to juvenile sentencing guidelines later allowed for his sentence to be reviewed, but the court upheld the life term. His inappropriate behavior during court proceedings, including grinning, drew widespread criticism. Lindsay remains incarcerated at Blackwater River Correctional Facility. Jordan Klee, a talented high school athlete from Ann Arbor, Michigan, was a star in both academics and sports, with dreams of attending the University of Michigan and joining its football team. On October 4, 2016, those dreams were tragically cut short when Jordan became the victim of a robbery attempt. Police arrested 17-year-old Dante Wright and 2 others in connection with the incident. Wright's behavior during the trial, including grinning, deeply upset Jordan's grieving family and shocked those in the courtroom.
Your answer will never be good enough. There will never be an answer good enough to satisfy why you shot my son. Why you thought that what you had should be yours. Why you felt that what you wanted, you were entitled to. Why you thought his death was an acceptable response to your jealousy or desire to what he had. Drugs, clothes, money, jewelry, phones, shoes, whatever it was that you felt you needed more than his life. Your why will never be better than his life. Your want will never trump my son's death. You get to live, get to wake up every day. Your life continues. I sincerely hope that whatever it was you wanted so badly that you felt the need to murder my son was worth the next at least 52 years of your continued existence.
Despite initially being offered a plea deal, Wright's behavior led the judge to impose a harsher penalty. He was sentenced to 23 to 50 years in prison for second-degree murder. The sentence reflected the severity of the crime and the emotional toll on Jordan's family. Karen tries to twist the story in her favor, but the judge doesn't buy it. Her husband is very upset with her decisions.
The week of May 15 for the trial.
Stop it. Okay. Stop it.
Rachel, call.
Taylor, relax, Taylor.
Good, stop.
She's got your cord.
Got my thing.
Clear the courtroom. Taylor, stop.
Ma'am, stop. Just stop.
Taylor, it's me.
Nope, you have to go out, sir.
Peter, settle down.
Clear the courtroom.
Peter, settle down.
Yep.
Calm down, Mija. Calm
Go
down.
out.
Peter, settle down. Peter, settle down.
I love you.
Get your transports back. Only gonna get her out of here.
205 transports.
Yep.
We'll need you back here ASAP for transport with that direct.
Hey Derek, I got a pen on the ground.
What do you have?
Pen on the ground.
She must have went off as soon as I left.
Gracias.
Got her. There you go. Just relax, Taylor, okay?
You guys probably didn't get it, but your video, just make sure they're on now.
You went off on your attorney, Taylor. You went crazy on your attorney.
You can't do that.
You okay?
Yeah,
Are you able to sit
You're gonna
up?
stay here for a minute, all right?
Are you able to sit up, Taylor?
She can, man. She's gonna stay right where she's
Okay.
at.
Right.
Just
I
relax.
wanted to make sure Quinn
Let
didn't
you
need
breath.
medical.
You called me Dylann Roof.
He's good.
Yeah, what the did
I
he
have
need?
no idea.
Okay, cameras.
I'm sorry.
Cameras.
I asked Quinn if he needed medical.
Taylor?
Like, he does.
Was he
Are you
injured?
okay?
She went to him.
Okay,
Fine.
but he's okay?
He's okay.
I'm
I
gonna have you
asked
sit
him.
up against the door. Okay, we're gonna help you. Okay? So
Um,
get your feet underneath you. Turn towards me,
they can't open it.
just a little bit.
No, that's okay. We'll use it.
I have this
All right,
whole
1, 2,
area
3.
cleared.
Okay, slide back.
Yep.
All the way to the door.
Use your feet and just push back. There you go.
There you go, perfect.
One more big one.
You're good. All right. Just relax. Are you hurt?
No,
You hurt anywhere? Your wrist?
no,
I see you got some bruising.
no,
Any tingling in your fingers or feet or neck?
no.
Good.
Why don't we?
Your vision okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything
All right.
over, down into the.
What do you want her to
You wanna go to the second floor, holding? Covered?
It's first covered or we might as well close it?
Well, we're gonna prelim.
Okay, because they're bringing 7 in.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just go to second
Sorry,
floor and then we'll stand by there.
Taylor, can you walk?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, can you get your shoes on? Get my paper.
Got it.
205 monitor, we're moving to second floor holding for 8 monitors.
Well, this Karen should have learned how to speak and behave in court before facing the judge.
Good morning. Are you Janetta Pugh?
I'm the beneficiary of that estate.
You're the what?
I'm the beneficiary of that estate.
You're the beneficiary of what estate? Answer my questions, please, ma'am. I'm just trying to understand.
Beneficiary of the estate.
Okay. What's the announcement?
Judge, it's my understanding that Ms. Pugh and her family has retained an attorney on this matter. You may, I don't know if you remember, Judge, this is when I was originally appointed on, and we were on the trial docket. She hired a new attorney at that point. Mr. Norwood, who was on the case for a while and then withdrew. And once recently when the case came back to me, I visited with her and I was told that they did retain another attorney. I was given the name of Christopher Wiley this morning, but I have not heard from him. And my understanding is that at this point still hasn't filed anything with the court.
Okay.
But I've been told that that's who's supposed to be taking over the case.
Okay.
For the record, I recognize Ms. Pugh. She's been here before.
I do as well, for the record.
And I looked into Mr. Christopher Wiley. I can't find that person as a practicing lawyer in the state bar page, and I have not been contacted by anybody on Ms. Pugh's behalf.
All right, so Ms. Pugh, Mr. Lewis has been appointed to represent you at this point. Obviously, you know as well as anyone that you're in custody and we want to get your case taken care of. If you've hired or your family has hired another lawyer, then they have to contact the court so that we can do something with your case. And do you know if they've hired someone?
Respectfully, Your Honor, I do not agree with your appointed foreign agents, considering that the first duty is to the state and will be considered conflict of interest, Your Honor.
Okay, so if you don't want, the only thing I can do, I'm appointing an attorney to you to help you, right? So if you don't want a court-appointed attorney, then your only option, two things. One is to represent yourself or to hire a lawyer. So if you don't like the way it works, then you do something different. So are you, listen to what I'm saying. Are you either going to represent yourself? Or are you going to let Mr. Lewis represent you? Or are you going to hire someone?
Objection, Your Honor. Respectfully, is this a court of record?
It is a court of record. So your objection's overruled.
Okay. Respectfully, Your Honor, where is the verified claim that is being placed against my trust?
It's right here. It's called an indictment. And Mr. Lewis has a copy of it and he can show it to you. So that would be the verified claim against you.
Okay. Your Honor, respectfully, Your Honor, there were writs that was filed to the case that still haven't been received.
I've received your petition for writ of habeas corpus and it's denied.
Okay. Respectfully, Your Honor, I demand to be released due to lack of evidence of stated claim and not being given the proper opportunity to obtain proper counsel, defective defense.
It's overruled.
Okay.
You're running out, aren't you?
No, it's fine.
So here's the thing, Ms. Pugh. I appreciate your position, but listen, Ms. Pugh, don't speak over me.
Respectfully, Your Honor, with my incarceration.
Ms. Pugh, just because you say respectfully does not mean that you get to interrupt me. That's disrespectful, right? Hang on. Listen to me. Everything you have there is overruled. And here's one of the reasons why, is because you have a lawyer and your lawyer will file the appropriate motion. You're interrupting me again, which is disrespectful. So I'm going to leave Mr. Lewis as your attorney unless you choose to represent yourself or hire someone else. I'm going to give you 2 weeks to determine what you're going to do. You can go back. You can go back with the bailiff.
I do not agree or comply to your appointed
Go back.
agents.
You already said that, and that's overruled.
Is to the state.
Go back with the bailiff. Get your own attorney or represent yourself if you don't like it.
Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.